Good morning, everyone. How is the Saturday starting off for you? It's Reed Schwartz with eXp Realty, and this morning I'm going to do a little Q&A. So if you have some questions about buying a home, go ahead and put those in the comments, and I will take a look at those and we'll give you some answers. So go ahead and put some things up there. In the meantime, talk a little bit about what's going on in the real estate market. And I've got a few questions that some people have emailed in as well, so we can go over those. But first, I'd like to start with a little bit of background, kind of a story. So, one of the reasons I got started in real estate was because I had an interesting real estate transaction myself. And let's see. In 2008, I sold my personal home. This was before I was a real estate agent, and I sold it for sale by owner to someone that I knew. We came to a good, agreeable price. We had a couple of interesting things that happened with that. Number one was that was during, the housing market was still going crazy just before it crashed or just as it was crashing. And there was some, let's just say, less than reputable things going on. So her first mortgage lender actually came and sat down with us and tried to negotiate as a real estate agent, which they can't do. That's not what they have a license to do. Made her feel so creepy about just the way he went about things that she actually asked me to terminate the transaction so that she could get out of working with him, and which we did. And then she found another lender, and the transaction went fine. We got through the transaction. She bought my house. We moved. She moved in. Everything was great. And then about 2 years later, I got served with a lawsuit from her stating that the septic system had failed and that it was my fault and that I had lied to her or withheld information from her or something. Now, when I sold the house, I was selling for sale by owner, but I was not entirely naive. My father has been a real estate broker for 30 years. I had worked in his business, not as an agent, but in marketing. But I wasn't totally naive at how real estate worked. And so, yeah. So what happened when I sold the house, we had it inspected. The septic system was inspected. She had the right to be at the inspection. She chose not to be there, but we had a licensed septic inspecting company come out and inspect it, and everything passed just fine. So 2 years later, out of the blue, I get served with this lawsuit saying that the septic system failed. So I went and tried to talk to her in person. As it turned out, she worked at a local business. I knew the business owner. And I went and talked to her. And, initially when she came out to talk to me, she said, "Well, I can't talk to you. My attorney says I shouldn't talk to you." I said, "Well, you should probably talk to me." And I explained to her, septic systems are underground. What happens with them, at that point in time, my opinion was, when you flush the toilet and it goes down and it doesn't come back up, to the consumer, to the average person, to 99% of the world, it's working. What else are you supposed to know? And we had it inspected. So it turned out the septic system had failed after she'd bought the house a while down the road. And a septic company had come out and told her that the system was failed. Personally, a term I despise. There are multiple parts to a septic system. Saying the system is failed, yeah, not a big fan. Hey, while I'm chatting here and telling you this story, if you got some questions you want to ask about buying or selling real estate, go ahead and put those in the comments and I'll take a look at those. So So I told her what was going on. I said, I didn't have anything. I don't have any information about it. I mean, it was inspected. That's what we did. So she insisted that she was going to sue me. I originally went and saw an attorney, and she was suing me for $20,000 to replace the septic system, which cheap by today's standards. So I went and saw an attorney who said he would represent me. It was going to cost me $20,000. About 2 hours later, I emailed, called, and sent a letter to him saying, "You're not representing me. I will deal with this myself." So I spent weeks, if not months, reading up on the law, getting copies of the actual code. I did have an attorney that I consulted with that kind of guided me a little bit. And then I took time off of work before it came time to go to court. I took a couple of days off of work just to go sit in the courtroom and see how things happen. I mean, I was very nervous. I'm not an attorney. I've never done something like that before. So I did that. And so I was a little more comfortable with at least what the process was. And I'd done my research. I had a 3-ring binder with, tabs for each little part that was a part of the case and all my information. So the funny thing is when I had bought the house 8 years prior to that, it had failed the septic inspection. But what turned out to happen was it was a more complex septic system. So your basic septic system, you have a septic tank. Everything goes in the septic tank. The liquids flow over and flow out through a filter, down a pipe to a drain field, which is basically, they're a little more complicated nowadays, but basically PVC pipe with holes in it, buried in sand. So when I had, but when I bought the house, that house also had a sand filter and a mound system. So what actually drained was a raised pile of sand, basically, with all the pipes in it. But that was like 50 feet away from the house, and there was a couple of pumps, and the pump would pump the water out there. Well, it turned out that before I bought the house, somebody had driven a tractor over the yard or some piece of heavy equipment and broke that line between the pump and the mound system. So when it failed the septic, they inspected it, they dug it up, they found the problem. They fixed that piece of pipe. Everything was great, worked for 8 years. I am 90% certain that's what happened to the gal that bought my house. When I know because my parents lived next door and they saw heavy equipment over there. They were moving stuff around. So long story short, I didn't do anything wrong. So I went to court and she had an attorney and I won. I won the case. I made my case. I won the case. Not only did I win and was found, that I didn't, I won. I also got all of my fees back. All the time I took off work to prepare, all the money I spent. Some of those legal books are expensive. I'd spent hundreds of dollars on legal books to get ready for the case. I got reimbursed for all of that. So, the lesson is my mistake by not having a real estate agent. I think her attorney sued me because he thought I was an easy mark because I'd sold it for sale by owner, number one. Number two, I had missed one unbelievably. I filled out the entire seller's disclosure form. There was one box about the septic system I merely had missed checking. So I'm also sure that was another reason why he thought I was trying to hide something because I missed that. It was merely an omission. I had nothing to hide. So I won the case and I got paid not only, I got reimbursed for my costs. Now, when you win a lawsuit, you get a judgment from the judge. Now, disclaimer, I am not an attorney. You should consult an attorney for any legal advice you need. But so you get a judgment, but that doesn't mean you get your money. That means that the judgment, I think it said she had 21 days or something to pay me. I forgot, it was several $1,000s. However, I had done my research and there's a company called Nolo Press, Nolo Press, and they publish how-to legal books for the average person, how to get married, how to get divorced. I don't know about getting married, how to get divorced, how to do bankruptcy, how to file a lawsuit, how to defend against a lawsuit, which I had purchased some of those books. And then they also have a book on how to collect a judgment. And I purchased that book. And so at the 21 days when she hadn't paid me, I followed exactly what it said in the book. I sent her a letter, and it said that according to Washington state law, and it listed the Washington state code, the WAC, WAC, Washington Administrative Code, and there's a big long number there. And I listed that code and said, according to this, I can take the sheriff and go to your bank and take all the money out of your bank account to get my judgment. I can put a lien on your house. I can take your car with the sheriff to collect that judgment. And I sent that letter registered mail to her, and like within 5 days, she called me up and said, I have a cashier's check for you. Where can I meet you? So, but back to why I think I got sued. I got to because I didn't check that one box on the Form 17, which is the seller's disclosure form. And that's one thing as a real estate broker, we always review that. My number one instruction to sellers, the seller has to fill the form out. I can't fill it out for you. But you always, always, always check one box on every line. And that's from experience. Number two, I was a for sale by owner, and he thought I was an easy mark. Yep. And number three, I think that he may have taken advantage of her as a woman, that he thought that obviously she did listen to what he told her, and I'm pretty sure that he got paid regardless of the outcome of the case. And so if you hire a real estate agent instead of doing it for sale by owner, there's a couple of benefits. Number one, you have somebody who's a professional at those forms to double check everything, give you advice and guidance going through the form. Number two, we carry liability insurance, errors and omissions insurance. If we miss something, we are insured, and that's going to pay for an attorney to fight said lawsuit. So even if I screwed up and didn't catch it and you got sued, we have the errors and omission insurance, which covers that. So a couple of good reasons to hire an attorney. So there you go. So let's see what questions. Anybody got any questions coming in? I'm not seeing anything. So I have one from jakem82@gmail.com. And Jake asks, how do I know if I'm financially ready to buy a home? And what unexpected costs should I plan on beyond the down payment and the mortgage? Well, to decide whether you're financially ready, you need to be able to figure out number one thing is you need to sit down with a mortgage lender, because I can give you all the advice that I want, and I can give you numbers and guidance. They are the professionals at that. That's what they do every day. There's ratios between your income and your living expenses. There are expenses you may not think about that you need to count. There's other expenses that don't matter. So your credit report, obviously, but if, having them pull your credit report is better than you pulling your credit report. I mean, you can pull it ahead of time, but I would just go see a good local mortgage lender, someone you can sit down with. And I know there's this tendency to want to do everything online. I just am a firm believer it's much better to meet with a person. And they're going to have you fill out a bunch of information online, but then to sit down with them and talk through your situation and whether or not you are ready to purchase a home. I mean, in the round numbers, I mean, if I can do some rough numbers on what a mortgage is going to be. You can look up a mortgage calculator online and say, hey, I'm buying a house that's $450,000 and I'm putting 20% down, and know that you have the 20%. And then what's my mortgage? You go, hey, if I'm already paying that much money in rent, then you're probably pretty close. But you definitely need to talk to a mortgage lender, because the first two steps in looking at buying real estate is, number one, find a real estate agent that is knowledgeable and will educate you, and that you get along with and you like to work with and knows the local area. And number two is get pre-approved for a mortgage, because unless you're paying cash, but even then, we still need proof of that you have the funds. So before we go looking at houses and talking to people about writing offers, we need to be able to have proof that we can buy that house. So you need to get that pre-approval. And so I would just say, going to them. And as far as what was the other part of the question was unexpected costs. some of the costs you may not think of are, and I'm just going to use an example. We'll just say our median sales price here is about a little over 500,000, 550. We're going to use something $500,000 home. So you're going to have upfront out of your pocket. You're going to have a inspection. So when you buy the house, you make the offer on the house. We're going to have a home inspection done. Home inspection is going to cost you $4 or $5, probably around $400 or $500, depending on the inspector. That is an out-of-pocket cost. That is an expense whether or not you buy the house. You're also going to have some earnest money, and the earnest money needs to be delivered to escrow within a few days of having an accepted offer. Within typically 2 to 3 days, gets delivered to the escrow office, and that money is it is something you may get back if the deal doesn't go through, and it does get applied towards your purchase price. But that earnest money can be anywhere from $500 to $20,000. Depends on the individual circumstance, on your circumstance, on what's going on in the market, on what's going on with that house. If there's multiple offers, we may highly recommend you put more money up, but it's all subjective to the individual situation. So then the other expenses, those are the expenses up front. You're going to put up the earnest money, and you're going to have that inspection in the first week after you have got an offer accepted on a piece of property. And then the rest of those expenses come up when you're in escrow as part of your closing costs. And I'll go over those in a minute. There's one other case in which you could have an expense. If you're buying a home that has its own well, the well inspection is a cost for you. And so having somebody getting water quality testing done. Also, if you want somebody to come in and actually inspect the physical well, the equipment in the well, then that would be an expense to you. And then going back to the home inspection, you're 90% of the time, 85% of the time, the home inspector is your expense. But there's that 15% of the time when the home inspector comes back and says, hey, I looked at this, and but there's some foundation issues that, their home inspectors are not an expert at everything. They're a generalist. They look at everything. They do a really good job. But they also, if there's things that are outside of their scope or you need someone with more expertise, it's their job to recommend those people. And it is your job in looking out for your own best interests that you hire experts. And there's like a whole paragraph about yay long in the real estate contract that says it's the buyer's obligation to hire an electrician, a plumber, a structural engineer, and the list goes on and on and on and on to determine that you understand what you're purchasing. It's called buyer beware. So that is the case. It could be, it doesn't happen very often. Typically, it's not a big deal, but occasionally there are things with like foundations that could have a little bit of expense to have somebody come out and advise you and consult with you for that. So then the rest of the extra expenses are once we get into escrow, and that's going to be closing costs, and that money is due at the close of escrow. So not till the day before closing, typically. And those extra expenses you may not be thinking of, there's going to be fees associated with your mortgage. There's lender fees, there's a credit report fee, there's an appraisal. Appraisals right today in 2025, I think they're running around $900,000. Some lenders will require you to pay that up front before they order the appraisal. Other lenders will not, and it will just be part of your closing costs. So be aware of that. That's another expense that could come up depending on the lender. And then you have escrow fees. So the escrow fees, the escrow company, title and escrow. In escrow they're the Switzerland of the real estate transaction. They're the ones in between. They don't represent the buyer. They don't represent the seller. They're there to take the contract, accept money, distribute that money out, and file the paperwork to make the transaction legal. So those fees are typically split about 50-50 between a buyer and a seller. And let's say a $500,000 transaction, they're probably $1,500, $1,600. So your half would be, $600, $700, maybe $800. And then title insurance is another one that people aren't aware of. And that if you're financing the purchase, there are 2 title insurance policies that are purchased, and those would be one is the seller is going to purchase a title insurance policy that insures you as the buyer, and then you as the buyer purchase a title insurance policy that is insuring your lender and guaranteeing that you are getting clean title to the property. So and that could be on a $500,000 house, probably $1,200 to $1,500, somewhere in that range. We can look it up. You go to title company, most of the websites have a chart that tells you how much the title insurance is. And when you're writing an offer, your agent should give you an estimated closing cost sheet. It's a spreadsheet that breaks down what all the costs are. It's not exact because nothing's exact till the day we close escrow, because there are also fees or not fees, but there are, say, your property taxes. If the seller has already paid the property taxes till the end of the year, but then you're closing escrow on the 5th of November, you're going to be paying the seller back for the taxes from the day you take possession of the home until they were paid till the end of the year. And the same thing can happen with an HOA fees like that. And escrow will prorate those so that each party is made whole at the close of the transaction. So that covers most of the fees. I mean, you can also have fees with your lender for points. Points are used to buy down your interest rate to get a lower interest rate. So essentially what you're doing is paying some of that interest up front, paying a fee to the lender to lower your interest rate. And sometimes that's worth doing, and sometimes it's not. Always depends on an individual circumstance. So wow, that was a long-winded answer. I need a little bit of breakfast drink. Okay, what's next question? Let's see. Sarah_Townsend54 at yahoo.com. Should I wait for interest rates to drop, or is it smarter to buy now and refinance later? Well, right now, interest rates are coming down a little bit. I do not expect them to come down dramatically, but there's a lot of political stuff going on that could make interest rates go back up, could make them come down. Everything's changing day to day, so it's really hard to say. I would say you should buy a house that you can afford the payment on now. Waiting for interest rates to go down, home values are going up. So, and as interest rates come down, so first of all, home values are continuing to go up here in Island and Skagit counties. They are still going up at about 3.5%, what they've been doing for the last couple of years. So we're not seeing a big drop off like in Texas and Florida. They've seen prices drop. We're not seeing that here. So if you wait longer, the price you're going to pay is going to be higher. As interest rates come down, more people are going to jump in the market. There are millions of people sitting on the sidelines waiting for interest rates to come down to get in the market. So we could end up with, depending on what rates do, you could end up with a situation where you have a much more competitive market, and you could end up overpaying for the property because there were multiple offers. And even today in our market now, we are still in a seller's market. Homes are sitting on the market about 65, 66 days is the median from the time they go up for sale until they sell. And we are seeing, we still see multiple offers on some properties. Those just cherry perfect, one that's prepared beautifully, that's, in the right neighborhood, the right floor plan, and, presented properly, looks really good, great curb appeal, and is priced at that right sweet spot. Those houses are still seeing multiple offers. So you got to keep that in mind. If that's the house you're looking for, even now you could be getting into a multiple offer situation. And waiting a couple more months, I mean, right now we are in first week in March. Our real estate market is starting to really ramp up. More buyers are coming on the market. Last week, the number of people applying for mortgages went up 20%. So as interest rates are down, they're at about 5.76 as of yesterday. So we're going to keep seeing, and this is the time of year. There's a definite seasonality to real estate sales. And as we come into the springtime and March, April, May, June are the really hot times of year when we see the most homes go on the market and the most homes sell. So while there will be more inventory, there will be a lot more competition. And if interest rates keep coming down on top of that, so the time to buy is when you're ready. Unless there's something really extraordinary, and we're not going to see interest rates go down to 3 or 4% again in the foreseeable future. And hopefully we won't see them jump back up to 8% either. So you need to buy a house that you can afford, and you should buy it when you're ready and make that move, and find a professional that will guide you for your individual circumstances and depending on what exactly you're looking for in a home. Okay. So our next question, M. Randall, 1989 at outlook.com. What's the biggest mistake first-time home buyers make that they should avoid? Choosing their real estate agent. You need to have some questions that you ask your real estate agent. Number one, how many do you mostly work with buyers, or do you mostly work with sellers, or a balance? Ideally, you want somebody that's fairly balanced, because then they understand both sides of the transaction. Somebody's just representing buyers. They don't see what's going on from the seller side. They're not seeing the multiple offers. They're not seeing some of that part of it. Do they know the neighborhood? You don't necessarily want an agent from Seattle helping you buy a house on Whidbey Island, or from Bellingham helping you buy a house in Mount Vernon or Stanwood, because there's idiosyncrasies to the market. Yeah, they know how to write a real estate contract, but part of every deal is number one, knowing the neighborhoods is important. So you can get some insight into what that is, and they're there to be your consultant. That's what your real estate broker is. They're there to educate you, to give you the inside scoop, and to negotiate for you. And that's where the other part is. It comes into the negotiating. See, when you have an agent from outside the area, sometimes there are some legality things they may not be aware of. In each county has some different forms that are needed. But the negotiating is real estate agents work together. Well, on one hand, we compete with each other to get clients. On the other hand, no transaction goes through without buyer and seller agents working together to bring a transaction together. So having being able to pick up the phone and have a good conversation with the other agent to get insight into what, for an example, if you're representing a buyer, I'm representing you, calling and finding out what's the situation going on with that other agent, with the seller, what they had a deal and it fell apart, what happened with it, what's the seller's priorities. You want a real estate agent that's willing to pick up the phone and make that call. There are some agents, and I'm not picking on anybody in particular, but I've experienced some agents that won't make the phone call. I've received offers that just showed up in my inbox, and I'm like, I never even heard from this agent. So they had no idea whether I had 3 offers that came in an hour ago, or whether I haven't had an offer, I haven't even had 2 showings. There's a lot of things, whether my client's available to review offers today. There's just a bunch of things. And I'm a big believer in communication with both my clients, and sometimes that is, picking up the phone and talking and meeting in person. And the same thing with the other agents in the transaction is to have that conversation with them, because it's a people business. It's a relationship business. And you don't get a good feel for what is going on with the other party from a text message. So you want somebody that knows the area. You want somebody that knows the other agents in the area. Very important. So other mistakes that a first-time home buyer should make: making an offer on the first house you look at. Don't do that. You need to go out and look at several homes, and you may need to do them in a day. Maybe you may find the house on your first house you look at, but I would highly encourage you to go out and look at several more to at least have a point of comparison before you jump in. The other one big mistake first-time home buyers make is going with the wrong lender. Some lenders charge a lot of fees for loaning you the money. The interest rate may sound good, but there's a lot of fees up front. And there's a couple in particular, and I'm not going to tell you who they are here, but call me. I'd be happy to talk to you about it. But there are some lenders that they charge a lot of fees, and you are in a negotiating position. You can do a good job talking to a lender, but your real estate agent should be able to give you some advice and point you to lenders that they know and work with that are local in the area. There are some lenders that are merely a number. And when you're making an offer on a weekend, there are some mortgage lenders that do not work weekends. And I find that amazing because real estate things happen fast. And when we need a pre-approval letter, or we need a change in our pre-approval letter, and it's 4:00 on Saturday afternoon, I need a lender to answer the phone. So there are some that do that and some that don't. There's one particular one that all they do is sign it with the name of the company. You don't even know who the individual person is that you're dealing with. And when you're going to borrow $500,000 from somebody, I think the least they should do is be a name and a face that you can deal with. So there you go. So there's some of the things you should watch out for as a first-time home buyer. You should be aware if you're moving not in town and you're going to be on septic and a well, there's expenses that go with that. Some people get really excited because they don't want to pay the city utilities, which can be a little spendy. And, a septic system is fantastic, but it's all good and fine and dandy until it fails. And then there's only one person paying the bill, and that's you, the homeowner. The same thing goes with having your own well. And, if your septic system fails, you are in deep, what. And if your well fails, you are thirsty. And you have to have those things fixed. And they're not cheap. Last septic system, I had a client that had replaced. We were selling the property and it failed. It was $40,000 to have the septic system installed, and took 5 months to get it done by getting through all the permitting process with the county. So just little things, just want to go into purchasing a home knowledgeable, and that's where your broker comes in, and that's their job, is to educate you and share all those little tidbits of information, and also connect you with contractors and people you need. Okay, next question. And I'm not seeing anything from YouTube. I'll go ahead, and if you got something there, put a question in there. I'd be happy to answer. This is em.funny6@hotmail.com. You be funny. How much negotiating power do I really have? And what are some of the creative ways to make my offer stand out? There are many creative ways to make your offer stand out, and some of those we'll talk about, and some of those I'm going to keep in my hip pocket. Every transaction is different. There are sometimes, but if you're in a competitive offer situation, the number one thing you need is to find out as much intel as you can on the seller. Find out what's going on. Find out what their goal is. I mean, we all want to think they want top dollar, maybe the most important thing, and that is the case in 85% of the transactions, but it's not always. So sometimes there's other things. Sometimes they need to stay in the home after the close of escrow. We can offer a lease back. There can be a lot of things that we can do to be outside the box. Finding out what other offers are, and that is where your agent comes in, and how well they know the other agent, how good of a communicator they are, that they can find out what other offers are coming in and what you can do to make yours stand out from there. There's adding, more earnest money down, waiving inspections, I never advise someone to waive an inspection. However, there are times when I advise that if you want to get the house, you're going to waive the inspection, because if the competing offers are waiving the inspection, that is a huge thing for a seller. It's one of the reasons I often recommend for sellers to have their home pre-inspected, because then it provides the buyers with a copy of an inspection report. So then they're more likely to waive their inspection. As a seller, you never, ever, ever ask a buyer to waive an inspection. There's a whole liability thing there. Never do that. But it happens. And in a multiple offer situation, that's sometimes the case. There's also pre-inspections buyers can do. So you can do an inspection before you write your offer so that you go in with your eyes wide open. That's another option we do. There are other creative things we can do to make your offer stand out. And we can talk about a few of those, but offline. Okay, hope you found that helpful. Hope everybody enjoyed the Q&A session. Got a little bit of information out of it. If you had any questions, feel free to message me directly, DM me, email me. My contact information is in the description of the video, or on Facebook, or looking at this many places. So feel free to reach out. I work with both buyers and sellers, and I most of my business is I concentrate on Whidbey Island and Skagit County, Anacortes, Mount Vernon, Stanwood, Burlington, Oak Harbor, Coupeville, Freeland. Then I lived on Whidbey Island for 30 years. Currently live in Skagit County. Absolutely love living here. If you're a buyer and you're moving to the area, this is and you've never been here, boy, are you in for a treat. This is an awesome little place, awesome place in the world to live. So there you go. My name is Reed Schwartz. I am with eXp Realty, and I will see you on the next video.